The word Tay and Tay mean the same in Gaelic, a dwelling house, and everywhere along the length of Loch Tay are scattered relics of the past, ruins of houses which had thatched roofs over earth floors, usually placed along rocky knolls, useless for cultivation, so that the folk could use every bit of the better land for growing hay or corn or as grazings for sheep and cattle. Groups of houses were known as townships, the folk sharing communal tasks and the common grazings. Passage of time across 3 centuries has blotted from memory the people who lived here. But one extraordinary person hasn't been forgotten. She lived a mile across Loch Tay on the shore under the peak of Ben Lawers. She's remembered for her extraordinary gifts of the second sight. This is the old village of Lawers, and this was the house of the Lady of Lawers. She was an Appin Stewart from the west coast of Scotland, and she came here about 1650. She married a John Campbell of Milton Farm, this farm. She was an extraordinary person, and local folk soon looked to her because of her wisdom and shrewdness. She had the gift of the second sight. And it was proved in one of the earliest things she said. They were building a kirk next to this house. The men were bringing in the stones to put in the ridge of the roof. And she said they would never be laid, and they laughed at her. But during the night, a terrific storm blew up. The stones were swept into the loch, and the stones never went on the roof. She planted an ash tree, and she said when it reached the gable, something would happen. Something would be rent in twain. Well, what was rent in twain was the kirk, the Church of Scotland disruption of 1843. The Lady of Lawers was buried below the ash tree, but before she died, she said that evil would befall anybody who cut it down. And the tenant of this farm did cut it down in 1895. And he was gored by his own Highland bull and died. The man who assisted him lost his reason and had to be locked away in a mental institution. And the young horse that pulled away the timbers died unaccountably. So this is the extraordinary thing about this woman. She looked so far ahead. Somehow these visions kept coming true, and that's why she's remembered to this day. Now, remember, she made the predictions in the 17th century, and here she was predicting into the 18th century that there would be a plough in every field, that there would be a mill in every stream. And in fact, there were 14 mills on Loch Tay side where there had been none, and there were 200 ploughs on one side of Loch Tay side alone, because that was the great age of agricultural improvement. But she went beyond that. She said there would come a time when the mouth of the sheep would rend the people from the land. These are Mervyn Brown's sheep. The dogs have rounded up about 500 from 1,000 acres of high hill, and now the sheep are on their way to the dipping pen. Mervyn is a Donegal man who's been here since 1951.
It's a mixture, typical hill farm, sheep stock, cattle, any crops are grown for consuming by the livestock on the place. At one time, it was divided into 5 different holdings. This was a long time ago, of course, and due to the process of amalgamation, which is going on around us the whole time, these 5 places now constitute the whole. In 1769, there were approximately 62 cattle, 62 cows, 330 sheep, and strangely enough, 28 horses. Horses, of course, were the means of locomotion in those days, and right up until 1962. So that it was very heavy stocking, also very heavily stocked with people, much too heavily stocked with people. If I may quote the survey of Loch Tay side in 1769, women very often had 20 children, of whom 2 were alive, so that the death rate was enormous. It was a hunger and a burst. In a good year, they got by. In a bad year, pestilence came in, illness, weather conditions, and there was tremendous loss.
Now, the Lady of Lors said that the mouth of the sheep would strip the land of its people, and you're a shepherd.
Yes, I suppose you could put it that way. I wouldn't just say the mouth of the sheep, but the fact that nowadays it's very difficult to get young shepherds. Shepherds' wives want better conditions. They're not so likely to want to live in the outlying places. Better technology means that one man may look after more sheep than before. All these things have come together to reduce the population in rural areas, most particularly in highland areas. If you look across on the other side of Loch Tay there, you can see, what I can see looking, 4 fields under the plough. Now, this isn't because people want to crop less, it's because they've got to. Less people to harvest crops. Grass is a cheaper crop to grow. Stocking rates are heavier, so that there's very little arable work done.
At the same time, the second Marquess actually cleared 500 families from the land. Maybe that was a bit drastic for that time, because there was very little alternative, wasn't there? People had to emigrate.
Well, at the risk of being hung, drawn and quartered, I would say that the clearances in Scotland, and to a smaller extent in Ireland, weren't altogether a bad thing. If you look in a similar glen in Ireland to this, it's still very highly populated, a much lower standard of living, smaller stocks, more difficult to make ends meet. So that although the humanitarian side of clearing people out wasn't a good thing, I think in the long run it gave us much better farms, much bigger areas under one person.